Chapter 1: The Secret Inheritance. I was sitting at my kitchen table when the phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize, but I answered anyway. The voice on the other end was calm. Too calm. Laura from Bishop and Keegan Law Firm. She told me that my grandmother's estate, everything she left behind for me, had been transferred to a mysterious company called Birchfield Enterprises. I couldn't believe it. My grandmother's legacy, the only thing that truly mattered to me, had been taken without my knowledge. And to make matters worse, my family was involved. My mother, my father, and my brother had all played a part in this betrayal. But I wasn't going to let them get away with it. I had to find out why they did this and take back what was mine, no matter the cost. Mia, this is Laura from Bishop and Keegan Law Firm. I'm calling regarding the estate of your late grandmother, Edith Grant. I froze. The name of my grandmother hit me like a freight train. Edith was everything to me. After my parents separated, she was the one who always had my back, who offered me a home, a safe place when the rest of the world seemed to be falling apart. Her sudden passing a year ago had left a gaping hole in my life, but I never imagined something like this would come next. I'm afraid there's been a development with the inheritance, Laura continued. The assets have been transferred to a holding company. We weren't expecting this change. I gripped the phone tighter. What do you mean? What holding company? I asked, my voice trembling. There's a company called Birchfield Enterprises, she replied, almost too casually. It seems your grandmother's assets were transferred there. According to our records, the transfer happened a few weeks after her death. I stood up, my legs weak beneath me. I had to sit back down. I hadn't heard of Birchfield Enterprises, and there was no way Grandma Edith, would have knowingly put her life savings into a stranger's hands. I had to know more. I needed to understand what was going on. What are you telling me exactly? Are you saying the inheritance isn't going to me? There was a pause on the line. Laura said, "We're still looking into it, but I'm afraid the assets are no longer under your control, Mia." I didn't know what to say. I just sat there, my mind spinning. I felt as if the ground had been pulled out from under me. My hands were shaking and my heart pounded in my chest. How could this be happening? How could my grandmother, who raised me, whose legacy meant so much to me, had had her final wishes manipulated like this? I needed answers, and I needed them fast. I hung up the phone and immediately dialed my mother, Sophie. She would know what was going on, right? She was always the one who kept track of these things. She answered on the second ring, her voice filled with warmth. "Mia, how are you?" "Mum, I need to know what's happening with Grandma's estate. I just got a call from the lawyer. Apparently, all of Grandma's assets have been transferred to a company called Birchfield Enterprises." There was a long silence. My mother didn't say anything right away. "Birchfield? I haven't heard of it," she finally said. "I'm sure it's just a misunderstanding. I'll call the lawyer myself and figure it out." But something in her voice didn't sit right with me. She didn't sound concerned, not nearly as concerned as I thought she should be. Her tone was almost too dismissive, as if this was no big deal. I pressed her. "Mum, how could this happen? Why wasn't I informed?" I asked, my voice rising, the frustration bubbling up. Why wasn't I told about any of this? "Well, Mia, things have been a bit complicated lately. But don't worry, I'm sure it'll all work out. I'll call the lawyer and get to the bottom of it." I wasn't convinced. Something was off. I didn't know what, but I couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning of something much bigger than I was prepared for. After I hung up with Sophie, I tried to push it out of my mind. but I couldn't. I knew I had to get to the bottom of this. I couldn't just sit around and wait for someone else to tell me what was happening with my grandmother's estate. The next morning, I called the law firm and demanded to meet with Laura in person. I needed to hear it from her directly. I couldn't rely on the phone anymore. I had to see her face to get a clearer understanding of what was happening. I arrived at Bishop and Keegan Law Firm that afternoon, my heart pounding in my chest. Laura greeted me at the door, and we walked into a small conference room where she handed me a stack of paperwork. "Here's the transfer of assets," she said, her voice polite but detached. "As you can see, your grandmother's assets were transferred into Birchfield Enterprises. The transfer was legal, and we're currently working on figuring out why it happened." I felt a cold rush of dread. I picked up one of the documents, scanning the pages quickly. There it was in black and white, the name of the company, Birchfield Enterprises. It was real. It wasn't some mistake. The assets had been transferred, and I had no idea why or how. My grandmother had never mentioned this company, and it didn't make sense. I turned to Laura, my voice steady but filled with disbelief. "What is this company? How could my grandmother's assets be transferred without my knowledge?" She paused. "We're still looking into it, but Birchfield Enterprises seems to be a subsidiary of a larger corporation. There are some questions we need to ask Mia, and we'll get to the bottom of it. But as of now, this company legally holds control over your grandmother's estate." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This wasn't just some mistake. This wasn't a simple mix-up. Someone had orchestrated this, and I needed to find out who. "Who authorized this?" I asked, my voice tight. "Who made this decision?" "I'm afraid that's part of the investigation," she replied, her voice sympathetic but distant. "But I'll make sure we find out. You'll be the first to know when we get more information." I felt like I was suffocating. This was my grandmother's life savings we were talking about, and I was being shut out. I was being left in the dark while some nameless company held everything she had worked for. "I want to know everything," I said, my voice hardening. "I'll do whatever it takes. I'm not going to let this go." Laura nodded, but I could see the doubt in her eyes. She wasn't as invested in this as I was. This was my fight, not hers. I left the law firm feeling more confused and unsettled than ever before. I had no answers, only more questions. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized that this wasn't just about money. This was about control, and someone had taken it away from me. By the time I reached my car, I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to sit back and let this happen. I was going to find out everything there was to know about Birchfield Enterprises, and I wasn't going to stop until I had the truth.
Chapter 2. The Hidden Truth. I called the law office again the next morning, my fingers drumming nervously against the desk as I waited for someone to pick up. After a few rings, Laura's voice came through the line. "Mia, it's good to hear from you again. What can I do for you?" I didn't waste any time. "I need to meet with you. Today. I can't wait any longer. There's something I need to understand. Something I missed in the documents you sent." Laura hesitated for a moment, and I could almost hear her thinking through her schedule. "All right. Come by around 2. I'll have the files ready." I arrived at her office just as the clock struck 2, my heart pounding harder with every step I took into the building. I needed answers. I needed to know why my grandmother's legacy was being stolen from me, and I couldn't rest until I had the truth. "Come in, Mia." Laura's voice came through, greeting me, her voice calm, but I could tell she was already preparing for a difficult conversation. She handed me a thick stack of papers, and I sat down at the table, spreading them out in front of me. "I went through everything again, Laura, and there's something I don't understand." I pushed one of the documents toward her, a copy of my grandmother's original will. Why would my grandmother leave everything to me? And then, why would she change her mind? Laura sighed, looking over the papers with a furrowed brow. We've been digging into Birchfield Enterprises, Mia, and we found some troubling things. Tell me everything, I said, my voice sharp with urgency. The transfer of assets was legal, and according to the records, it was signed off on by your grandmother. But we've discovered that the signatures on some of the documents, particularly the ones transferring the bulk of her estate, are questionable. I leaned forward, gripping the edge of the table. Questionable? What does that mean? There is a chance that someone forged your grandmother's signature, Laura said, her tone steady but filled with concern. It's not clear yet who did it, but the timing of these changes, they don't make sense. My blood ran cold. Someone forged her signature? My grandmother had always been so meticulous, so sharp. It didn't add up. But who would do something like that? Who in our family could be behind this? I didn't even wait for Laura to continue. Where does this leave me? If they forged her signature, does that mean the will is invalid? Laura hesitated again before answering. Not necessarily, but it's a gray area. We'll need more evidence to prove that the changes were illegal. That's why I want you to look at something else. It's about your grandmother's relationship with your mother. My stomach tightened at the mention of my mother, Sophie. What do you mean? We found a letter, Laura said, handing me an envelope. It was written by your grandmother a few months before she passed. It was addressed to you, but it was never sent. I tore the envelope open, my hands shaking. I unfolded the letter, the handwriting unmistakably my grandmother's. As I read it, my heart dropped into my stomach. Mia, I know what's happening, and I fear I've already lost the battle. Your mother has insisted on making decisions for me. She says it's in my best interest, but I know Eder. I don't want her to have control over what I leave behind. I'm trying to make things right, but I'm not sure if it's too late. Please don't let her take everything. Fight for what's yours, my dear. I'm sorry I couldn't protect you from this. I let the letter fall from my hands, my throat tight. The words hit me like a wave crashing against the shore. My mother, Sophie, had been involved in this all along. She was the one who had made sure I didn't get what was rightfully mine. I didn't know whether to scream or cry, but the anger bubbled up inside me. How could she do this? How could she betray me like this? Mia, I know this is a lot to process, but this letter, along with the forgery, gives us a lead. We need to get in touch with anyone who knew what was going on with your grandmother's estate. I'm going to find out who did this. I'm going to find out exactly what my mother did, and I'm going to make sure she can't get away with it. Just be careful, Laura warned. This could get very messy. If your mother is involved, things are going to get even more complicated. I stood up, my body tense. I wasn't going to stop until I had the truth, and if it meant tearing my family apart, so be it. I drove straight to my mother's house, my mind racing. I couldn't just sit back anymore. I had to confront her. I had to know if she was behind all of this, and if she was, she would pay for it. When I knocked on her door, she answered with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Mia, darling, what's going on? You look like you've seen a ghost. I didn't say anything at first. I just stepped inside and handed her the letter from Grandma. She took it, her hands trembling slightly, as she read it. Her expression faltered for a moment, and I could almost hear her thinking through her schedule. I didn't want you to find out like this. But your grandmother, Sophie, she was so stubborn. She wouldn't listen to reason. I could feel the anger rising inside me. So you did it. You manipulated her. You took everything from me. Her eyes widened. Mia, don't be ridiculous. I was just trying to help. I was looking out for her, looking out for you. No, I said, my voice rising. You took what was mine. You used her when she was weak, and now you've stolen everything from me. Sophie's face hardened. You don't understand, Mia. You never have. I was trying to protect you. I thought you were too young, too naive to handle it all. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. You did not protect me. You betrayed me. And now I'm going to make sure everyone knows the truth. Mia, you don't want to go down this road, Sophie said, her voice colder now. It's not too late to let it go. We can fix this together. No, it's too late, I said, my voice steady. I'm not going to stop until I have the truth. I turned and walked out of the house, the finality of my decision weighing heavily on me. I wasn't going to stop until I had the truth, and if it meant tearing my family apart, so be it.
Chapter 3. Confrontation with the family. I drove to my parents' house, the weight of what I was about to do pressing down on me with every mile. I wasn't sure how I was going to confront them, but I knew it had to be done. I couldn't live in this fog of uncertainty any longer. I had to know why my family had betrayed me, and I had to hear it from their own mouths. When I pulled into the driveway, the familiar sight of the house made me feel a pang of guilt, like I was about to ruin something that had once been sacred. But then I remembered the letter from Grandma Edith, the forged documents, and everything that had been taken from me. The guilt faded into anger, and I marched up to the door, ready for whatever was coming. My mother, Sophie, answered the door with her usual warm smile, though I could tell something in her demeanor had shifted when she saw my face. I didn't give her a chance to speak. "Where's Dad?" I asked, my voice firm. She hesitated before stepping aside. "He's in the living room. Mia, what's going on? You're scaring me." "I need answers," I said, walking past her without waiting for a response. Arthur, my father, was sitting on the couch, his expression unreadable. He looked up when I entered, his face softening. "Mia, what's this about? Why are you so upset?" I stood in front of them, not bothering to sit down. "I know what you did," I said, my voice steady but sharp. "I know about the changes to Grandma Edith's will. I know that you and Mom took her money, took everything from her, and didn't tell me a thing." Sophie's face turned pale. "Mia, you don't understand," she started, but I cut her off. "I don't understand? How could I possibly understand why you did this? Why you would manipulate her like that? Why you would steal everything she worked for?" Arthur stood up slowly, his eyes darting between Sophie and me. "Mia, we did what we thought was best. We were just trying to protect you. Your grandmother, she wasn't in a state to make decisions anymore. She needed help." "Help?" I snapped. "You mean control? You took her assets and gave them to a company that's connected to us, and you didn't even tell me." Sophie's face twisted with frustration. "We did it because we knew you wouldn't be able to manage it. You've always been so focused on your career, Mia. We thought it would be easier for you to focus on other things, and we were trying to keep the family legacy intact." I shook my head, disbelief flooding me. "So you thought it would be easier for me to just let you take everything? To watch you manipulate a woman who trusted you, who gave you everything, including the right to make decisions for her?" "Now wait a minute," Arthur interrupted, stepping closer. "We didn't manipulate anyone. We made sure Edith was cared for. She was getting older, and you were busy. We thought we were doing the right thing." "The right thing?" I asked, voice rising. "Do you even hear yourselves? You took something that wasn't yours to take. You used her, Dad." Sophie looked down, guilt flashing across her face for a moment before she composed herself. "I didn't want to do it this way, but your grandmother was making decisions that didn't make sense anymore. We thought it would be better to handle things ourselves." I stood there in silence, feeling the weight of her words. She thought she was helping me? My own mother thought that making decisions for me, taking away my inheritance, was helping me? It was clear to me now that I didn't know who my family was anymore. They had all become strangers to me. "You've been lying to me this entire time," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "You've been stealing from me, from Grandma, from everyone." Arthur's face hardened. "You don't know what you're talking about. We were trying to protect the family. You don't understand the pressures we were under. We had to make those decisions. It wasn't easy, but we did it because we thought it was what was best." I felt a bitter laugh rise in my throat. What's best for the family or what's best for you? Because I can't tell anymore. Sophie looked away, tears welling up in her eyes. "Mia, please, I'm sorry. I never meant for it to turn out this way. We only did what we thought was right." I could barely keep my composure. What was right, Mom? What was right was to let Grandma live her life and let me have the inheritance she left for me. You took that from me. You took everything. I turned to leave, but then something stopped me. I had to know the full extent of this betrayal, and I wasn't going to let them get away with it. "I know you took control of Grandma's estate, but what about the rest of it, Dad? What about the other things you've been hiding?" Arthur's face betrayed a flash of guilt before he quickly masked it. "What are you talking about?" I took a deep breath, staring him down. "I know there's more. More than just the money, more than what's on paper. Who's behind Birchfield Enterprises? Who were you working with?" Arthur's expression faltered, and for a moment I saw something shift in him, but it was gone before I could fully process it. "Mia, stop. You don't understand what you're getting into. Let it go." "Let it go," I repeated, my voice low and dangerous. "No, I'm not letting this go. I'm going to find out everything. You can't hide from me anymore." Sophie stood up, her voice trembling. "Mia, please, you're tearing this family apart." "You've already done that," I said, my heart breaking as I looked at her. "You've torn it apart. And I'm done pretending that this is just some misunderstanding. I want the truth, and I won't stop until I get it." I stormed out of the house, the door slamming behind me. My chest was tight with rage and confusion. I couldn't believe what I had just learned. My parents had crossed a line I couldn't come back from, and no matter how hard they tried to justify it, I couldn't forgive them. I needed answers, and I wasn't going to stop until I had them. Chapter 4: The Battle for Justice. The first step in my plan was clear. I needed to hire a lawyer who could take on my family and their powerful connections. I'd been researching firms for days, sifting through every recommendation and referral I could find. I needed someone with experience in high-stakes cases, someone who wouldn't back down just because my family had money and influence. I finally found someone I felt could help, a seasoned lawyer named Mark Hamilton. He had won several landmark cases against large corporations, and his reputation for handling complex, contentious disputes was exactly what I needed. I reached out to him and scheduled a meeting as soon as I could. The day of the meeting, I was a bundle of nerves. I arrived at his office, a sleek, modern building in the heart of downtown. The receptionist directed me to a conference room where Mark was waiting for me. He was a tall, well-built man in his mid-40s, with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor that immediately put me at ease. "Miss Hayes," he said, extending a hand. "I've heard a lot about your case. Sit down. Let's talk." I sat down, and the heaviness in my chest only grew as I began explaining everything: how my grandmother's assets had been stolen, how the will had been altered, and how my family had played a central role in all of it. Mark listened carefully, nodding occasionally as I spoke. "Your family seems to have deep ties here," he said after a pause, glancing at the papers I'd brought. "You understand this won't be easy. We're not just fighting over money here. We're fighting against a group of people who have power and influence." "I know," I said, my voice steady, "but I don't care how difficult it is. They took something that wasn't theirs, and I want it back. I want justice for my grandmother. Mark leaned back in his chair, assessing me. That's the right attitude to have, but we'll need more than just the good reason to win this case. We need hard evidence. What do you have? I pushed the documents across the table, including the forged will and the letter from my grandmother. He took a look at them, his brow furrowing. This letter, he said after a moment, this is a strong piece of evidence. If we can tie this to the signatures on the will, we may have a case for fraud. I felt a surge of hope, but it was quickly followed by a sense of dread. But they're going to fight this with everything they have. I know it. They will, Mark agreed. And I'm sure they've already got a team of high-powered attorneys working on their side. But don't worry, I've dealt with worse. As we continued to discuss strategy, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was about to face something far bigger than I had imagined. My family wasn't just rich. They had connections everywhere. I was going to have to be smart, strategic, and above all, patient. The next few weeks were a blur of paperwork, meetings, and back and forth communication with Mark's team. We sent out subpoenas, gathered more evidence, and slowly began to piece together the timeline of events leading up to my grandmother's death. But it quickly became clear that my family wasn't going to make this easy. I knew they'd fight back with everything they had. And they did. Every time we uncovered something, they countered with new documents or new versions of events. I could see the pressure mounting on Mark and his team as they dug deeper. But what really shook me was how quickly they were able to manipulate the public narrative. The media began running stories painting me as the villain. Someone greedy, someone who couldn't accept the fact that my family had done what was best for my grandmother. They made it sound like I was the one creating chaos. One afternoon, I was sitting in Mark's office when he dropped the bombshell. "We found something," he said, pushing a file across the desk. I opened it, feeling the weight of what was inside. It's a witness statement. A man who worked with your grandmother at Birchfield Enterprises. He says your family have been pulling strings behind the scenes. They've been manipulating things for years, and this witness is willing to testify. I stared at the document, my hands trembling. Finally, some real leverage. This was it. This could be the key to turning the case in my favor. Mark leaned forward, his expression serious. This witness could change everything, but it's not going to be easy. Your family's going to do everything they can to discredit him, to make him look unreliable. And I have no doubt they will try to tear him apart in court. But for the first time, I felt a glimmer of hope. We had evidence, and we had a witness who was willing to stand up for what was right. I spent the next few days preparing for the next step, bringing this evidence to court. The pressure was unbearable, and the thought of facing my family again filled me with dread. But I couldn't stop now, not when the truth was finally within reach. As I walked into the courtroom on the day of the trial, I knew this was the moment when everything would either fall apart or come together. There was no turning back now.
Chapter 5. Karma and Justice. And there was no turning back now. I had crossed the line, and the only way forward was to see this through to the end. It wasn't just the legal battle that had me on edge. It was the realization that I had completely broken free from the family I once tried so desperately to save. They were no longer my responsibility. I wasn't their daughter, their pawn, anymore. The days following the trial were a whirlwind. After the final verdict, the consequences for my family came swiftly. Mara and Cassie's lives unraveled in a way I couldn't have imagined. The legal charges were severe: money laundering, fraud, and conspiracy to conceal assets. The assets that they had so carefully hoarded for years were seized, their personal accounts frozen. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel the slightest bit of guilt. As I sat in my office the day after the verdict, the phone rang. It was Elias. I hadn't heard from him since the trial ended. I picked up, unsure of what to expect. "Clara, I wanted to check in."
Elias's voice was gravelly, but there was something comforting in his words. I know this has been tough, but I wanted to tell you something important. What's that? I asked, leaning back in my chair, my fingers tapping lightly on the desk. You've done something incredible, Elias continued, his voice softening. But it's not just about the money, the assets, or even the legal victory. You've taken back your life. That's what matters. I sat quietly for a moment, absorbing his words. I had been so focused on the fight, on reclaiming what was taken from me, that I hadn't stopped to consider the real victory here. It wasn't about punishing my family. It was about regaining my freedom. And Elias was right. It mattered more than anything. You've done more than just fight for what's yours, Clara. You've set yourself free. And don't let anyone ever make you feel like you owe them anything again. I could feel the weight of his words settling in. The battle had been long, painful, and full of doubt. But now, in this moment, I knew that everything I had done, every step I had taken, had led to this. I wasn't just fighting to regain my family's wealth or my father's legacy. I was fighting for my self-worth. The next few weeks were a blur of legal paperwork, asset distribution, and media coverage. It wasn't the victory I expected. The whole process felt sterile, impersonal. The real change was in me, not in the money I got back, not in the loss of my family's legacy. It was in the way I felt about myself. I had been reborn from the ashes of the destruction they left in their wake. But there was still something missing. Despite everything I had achieved, despite winning this battle, I felt the quiet, aching emptiness of loss. My family, the people I thought I could rely on, were gone. Not just physically, but emotionally. And the weight of that loss was heavier than anything I had ever imagined. One evening, I found myself sitting by the window, staring out at the city skyline. It was quiet, peaceful in a way that I hadn't allowed myself to feel in years. The apartment felt like a sanctuary now, a place I could finally breathe without the constant pressure of their expectations hanging over me. My phone buzzed, breaking the silence. It was Kevin. How are you holding up? You did it. You got your life back. I smiled softly, reading his message. Kevin had been a constant through all of this. He was the one person who never judged me, who never tried to manipulate me. He had always been the steady hand I needed, even if he had his own struggles. I'm doing okay, I replied. Better than okay, actually. I finally feel like I'm in control of my own life. The response came almost immediately. Good. You've earned it. Just don't forget that you're not alone in this. I sat back, letting the words settle in. I hadn't realized how much I had needed that reassurance. The days turned into weeks, and I began to realize something important. I didn't need my family's approval anymore. I didn't need their validation to be enough. The journey I had been on wasn't just about taking down my family's empire or reclaiming the wealth that they stole from me. It was about empowering myself. And in a way, it was about forgiving myself for letting them control me for so long. As the final pieces of my past came into focus, I made the decision to move forward, not just as a woman who had won her inheritance back, but as someone who had reclaimed her own sense of identity. I was done being the person they wanted me to be. I was done being the victim of their manipulation. I was my own person now, free to live the life I had always wanted. One evening, as I sat in my apartment organizing the final bits of paperwork from the estate, I received another call. This time, it was from my lawyer, Tom. Clara, he said, his voice filled with a mix of pride and relief. It's official. The case is closed. Everything has been settled. You've won. I felt the familiar tension release from my shoulders as the finality of his words sank in. I hadn't realized just how tightly I had been holding my breath until that moment. "Thank you, Tom," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "I couldn't have done it without you." "Of course," he replied. "But remember, Clara, this victory wasn't just about getting back what was stolen from you. It was about finding yourself again." I smiled, sitting back in my chair, finally feeling like everything was falling into place. I didn't need my family's approval, their fortune, or their love to be happy. I had already found everything I needed within myself. As the final chapter of this long, difficult journey came to a close, I couldn't help but feel a deep sense of relief. But it wasn't just the satisfaction of winning the legal battle. It was the realization that I was no longer tethered to the past. The toxic legacy of my family was no longer my burden to bear. And that, I thought, was the real victory.